Ladies and gentlemen, I adore speaking with Clayton. Clayton is a dear friend. Every time I speak with him, it's a joy and an event. I always learn a lot from it. I have an overflow of notes that I review. I always appreciate his insight when he comes to the net, when he shares what's on his mind, his way of framing things, his way of thinking is a gift to us all. And we just thought we'd get together, and I'm going to do one of my favorite things, and I'm going to say, "Hey, Clayton, what you thinking about? What you thinking about, Clayton? What you thinking about?" And thank you for being here, sir.
Thanks, Daniel. Always a pleasure to be here with you and on the net. And yeah, like I really appreciate that you have kept that space going and your dedication to kind of like hold that space. It seems underappreciated, but it's so valuable. It's like it's that we need that corner. So please never stop.
Yes, sir. Thank you for saying that, Clayton. I appreciate it.
Yeah, no, it's fantastic. In terms of what I've been thinking about, man, like we can go for days. But currently I'll show you a picture. So I have like a little old book here, and
Nice.
it's like a it's uh it's in a language that you may not understand. Yeah, so I've been fascinated with my native tongue and
Mm.
um, I'm trying. I'm like really trying to see if I can, prove the concept that you could train an AI to speak a new language
Wow. Yeah.
with very minimal resources, with not enough data. It's
Mm.
the more I dig into it, it becomes more and more complex. Like the challenges I'm running into are becoming more and more sophisticated. Uh, but it's interesting. So that is the rabbit hole I'm in, language and digitizing it and LLMs, how they work, how they think, and and all the drama that's involved in that. Um, but on the other hand, as well, like I've been fascinated with this whole, and I think it's been months now, like the whole distinction of correct, right?
Mm.
And yeah, it's like it keeps popping up everywhere, and I'm going like, oh wow, yeah, there's a conflation there, what's right and what's correct. And even with these AIs with the LLMs, what I'm finding is that yeah, they're very much coming from a logical intellect, and it's more like digital intellect, which is it's like there's a very big difference between digital intelligence and biological intelligence. And so it's like what we're solving for as biological creatures and our motivations are very, very different from these digital algorithms, and their goals are very different. The patterns they can observe are very different from the patterns that make sense to us and that we find meaningful. Uh, and so it's great. Like we're not going to be replaced by AI. Like I can definitively say that. Uh, on the bottom side, it's like we now have to partner with AI. That is probably you'd say the revolution that's going on right now, because you start to notice it that the the way people are embracing it and working with it is not exactly uh, they're overestimating, yeah,
Mm.
in many ways because of our human thing. So because like let's say if you went to a place you've never been and you find humans there, your assumption of what how those humans behave is going to be based off your experience. So you're going to try to relate with them the way you think they respond. And you probably see this with the animal activists, complaining about the pain that the animals are feeling on the farms. And you're like, I don't know, like, you sure about that? Like, your experience, you're projecting it on them. It, while it's a good, you're coming from a good place, it's not exactly something you can map one to one. Like you're never gonna know until you actually become a cow
Sure.
on a farm
Sure.
somewhere. Yeah, so it's the same challenge we have with the AIs. We're projecting ourselves on them, and we start to treat them as though they are like, biological creatures with biological goals, and they actually are not. They have very different intent. Uh, their goal is pattern recognition, at least like in most cases. They just want to recognize a pattern and predict the next sequence of whatever comes next in that pattern. And they don't have like that's you'd say the psychology of their intention. Like this is it. Like all these other extras we're putting on top of that and saying, no, it seems to care. No, it doesn't doesn't understand what care is yet. I add the yet because once they actually get embodied and start
Sure.
living inside robots, then they will have to care. They can't not care. you know, Phenomenology is a thing, and they have to deal with it.
Yeah.
So yeah, so that's I know I've said a whole bunch of stuff in
No,
there. So
fantastic.
that's what's eating me up and
That is
keeping
what
me
you are
awake at
thinking
night.
about. Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Fantastic. Well, I love it, and I'm taken by one, this idea of teaching a different language. Can you do it? That's very interesting because there's also, is there something about the very efficiency of AI that drives it toward a single use of language or one type of language? Like, is there a way? One of the things I was speaking with Cadell about, and I'd be curious your thoughts about it, because a lot of what you're saying too on this difference between correct and right, I think also come into play, which we discussed at the net, is like one of the things that AI struggles to do is think limit. Like the whole idea of it is that it is not limited. But funny enough, that actually could be a problem. Because it could be the human capacity. For example, we have energy restrictions. We can't focus on everything at once. So we actually have to be very good at walking into rooms and knowing what to value the relevant variables very quickly, right? But why do we learn this skill of sensing the relevant variables quickly? Because we're limited, actually, because we can't think a million thoughts quickly, because we get tired, et cetera, so forth. So the first funny thing that I've been thinking a lot about is there something about the very lack of limitation in AI that will make it incapable of valuation, make it incapable of determining the relevant values on its own quickly? Because instead of determining the relevant variables, it can calculate all the variables. So why would it just limit itself to learning one? It can just calculate every scenario and present it, right? And maybe it can calculate every scenario and then through a quick process of elimination determine which one of those scenarios is best. But that's actually a more, in a sense, inefficient route than just being able to go into a situation through a sort of intuition, a certain training of just being able to determine the relevant variables, right? So, in a funny way, there could be a way in which the very finite limitations of human thought actually makes us in a way more efficient because we discern how to go to the immediate relevant variables, whereas AI may have to calculate everything. And for me, there could be an issue where AI, like I struggle to think of how the very unlimitedness of AI would not get it stuck in an infinite processing problem. Because when I give it a prompt, I'm limiting it, right? Like I'm limiting what it's going to think about. Well, if no one provides the limit, if nothing provides the limit, then it's in an infinite processing problem. And the very fact that AI never sleeps and can be infinitely rational is actually why it then ends up in the infinite processing problem. Whereas the very fact that humans get tired, the fact that we can't think all day, actually is why we can become efficient at valuation and determining what is fitting in situations. And to me, that's very interesting because it makes me think of the correct right distinction. Like, what do we do when we go into a room? We are discerning what is like you go into an argument or you go into a social setting or you go into a space and you're able to determine what's right. Not necessarily what's correct, all of the information, all of the data, but what is right. And actually, the ability to know what is right is the only reason why you can resolve the situation. If all you could do is determine what is correct, as in what are the correct information, what is the correct variables, well, what is correct may actually dehumanize and kick out the relevant, right? there's a funny way in which the AI may be stuck in the correct, and if there are situations where you actually need the right, it wouldn't be able to get there. And the weird thing is that it would actually be the very limitations of human beings that create incentive for us to be able to tell the difference between right and correct. Now, of course, rightness can lead to self-rightness, self-righteousness, where the very fact that you're able to determine rightness also may make you, if you are wrong in that determination of rightness, try to cover it up with self-rightness. And this is where the AI partnership could be relevant because AI is like, well, yeah, but your rightness is actually left correctness behind. It's not, you now you're in falsity. So now it's self-righteousness, right? And this is where it seems to have a certain partnership. But it's just very interesting because I've been thinking a lot, and I'll just throw it to you, these are just opening thoughts, about how one of the reasons I think we worry about AI replacing human beings is because we don't think that limit actually enables us in ways. Because if and the reason that's important is because the idea is AI is not limited, we're limited, therefore AI replaces us. But that assumes that there are not abilities human gain because they are limited, that AI won't gain because it's unlimited, right? And I'm obviously channeling some of the great Kant Hegel debate that we have all the time and discuss with Cadell and so on and so forth. But if in fact limitation is one of the reasons humans say get good at determining and judging the form, to allude to Plato, or analogous reasoning, the ability to judge analogy, which is to see patterns of logical forms repeating. And then actually, there is a huge question here on the difference between pattern recognition and analogical reasoning. Does AI analogically reason? It would seem that AI pattern predicts. That's not the same. Recognizing pattern to determine probability is not the same as analogous reasoning, which is the ability to see the repetition of a logical form or to tell the logic in a description of two different things. So if I say something like, and it's tricky, there's a tricky difference between analogy and metaphor. They're very similar, but they're also slightly different. If I say, oh, he's as fast as a cheetah or something, right? It's like he's like a cheetah. That's a kind of metaphor where I'm understanding the quickness by which my son is moving relative to reference to a cheetah, right? So that's a metaphor. An analogy is more of where I grasp the logical unfolding of something by describing something else. Like if I were to say, God's hiddenness is like the sun behind a cloud, where if the sun's not behind a cloud, it blinds you. And so the concealment of the cloud actually is the enablement up to see the sun, right? That is metaphoric, but I'm also trying to more so get at a logic versus a description. Metaphor is more descriptive, analogy is more logical, and it's a form, a logical form, right? This capacity of analogy, which one would say, going to Aquinas and Leibniz and other thinkers, is the human capacity of thought. Analogous reasoning is human thought at its core. This very profound reasoning. Even Douglas Hofstadter, he wrote Gödel, Esker, Bach. He wrote a book called Surface and Essence, and he makes this argument. And there's a number of people who say, yeah, basically human intelligence is fundamentally analogous reasoning. And it's wild. It's wild how it works. There's a weird way in what if limit actually is the condition that creates incentive and training for analogous reasoning. In fact, it's hard to imagine why you would develop analogous reasoning without limitation. Like if you weren't limited, if you could just calculate everything instantly to understand how it unfolds, why would you need analogous reasoning to have a sense of how things unfold without doing the work of the calculation? Analogous is like analogical reasoning helps you get a result without getting stuck in infinite calculation, right? There's kind of a way what we're doing, we're saying, well, AI can give us the fruit of analogous reasoning through calculation, which humans couldn't do because the energy use would be too much and we would die. But AI can do it and get to the other side. But that assumes the calculation would ever end. What if it's literally infinite? Right? Then the only way to do it would be an act of apprehension, because also we've talked at the net about apprehension versus calculation. Analogous reasoning is tied to apprehension. And so anyway, the thing that I've been thinking about, I was thinking about as you were speaking, and I've also been thinking about, is that the very limitation of human beings could be of what actually affords us analogous reasoning and apprehension. That AI not having could remove what it needs precisely to develop that kind of thinking. But since we don't associate the condition that generates human thought as limit, we think the removal of limit means we'll be replaced because it's going to be better at what we do because it's able to do what we do unlimitedly while we're just going to do what we do limitedly. Therefore, AI wins. But again, just to repeat the point, that assumes that it is not the limit that creates the quality of thought unique to human beings. And I'm strongly of the opinion it is. I'm strongly of the opinion we learn to value, to apprehend, to engage in analogous reasoning because we are limited. We have to get the results of calculation without doing the work of calculation because we're not able to calculate well. We have limited energy. We get tired. We can't think of all the relevant variables. And maybe it's theoretically possible that AI, through calculation, will be able to give us a thought that is like an analogous thought, like an analogous reasoning, but the way that end is arrived at will be fundamentally different. And in a weird way, energy less efficient. It will be less energy efficient than human beings. But this is the funny thing, we're gonna hide that by stuffing it in a nuclear energy or natural resources. And so, oh my gosh, it's so efficient at thinking. Well, actually, it's just a trade-off. You're losing all of resources, you're destroying the environment and tearing everything up. But the thinking, yeah, sure, the thinking is more efficient. Actually, it would be way more efficient to just apprehend and not use up all the natural resources to create giant data centers that destroy the electric grid. But now I'm saying too much, and I'll pause and give it back to you. So I've been thinking about that, Clayton. I was thinking about that as you were talking.
Wow, that's wild. Like you just said, analogical reasoning is just wild, and you just demonstrated that. Uh, one thing that kind of like at the end there, like I was thinking, oh wow, where's the green AI? Why is nobody talking about green
No,
AI? Because
right.
we know we know the secret powering the AI. It's like, yeah, you have like huge energy problems, and if you look at what they're trying to build in Texas for the AIs next year, it's like, oh my God, it's like we need to solve this huge problem in such a very sophisticated way, and right now the only solution is like scale, massive space and massive resource. That's probably the current solution we can come up with. And I'm wondering, like, why has AI not solved the efficiency problem? Well, because it doesn't even understand
It
that
doesn't
that is.
understand if it no, because it's not
Yeah, it
limited.
does.
Exactly.
It doesn't care about limitations,
No.
and we we need to solve for the limitations. It's like and it's the limitations that have sort of like enabled us to rise to the top because we had to develop all these weird skill sets and to figure out how to create a new reality that was not able to be supported in the current state of things that we were in. And so like it's the limit that sort of like enabled us.
Yes.
It's easy to get fixated on the solution, but it's actually the limit that you need a good limit. I use this phrase of like good problems. You want to be solving the good problems. Yeah, similarly, you need those good limitations because any good limitation you solve for sort of like unlocks a whole new world. and and the problems are not that sophisticated, right? Like the problems that unlock more of the world, they're not that sophisticated, but they're really hard to solve. And when you start looking at how nature has solved for these problems, I mean, you start to see us humans, with our appendages and the design that sort of like we ended up with. It's like, yeah, this is the best you could get, with all the forces involved. And funnily enough, the other thing that came up for me was like, well, yeah, at the same time, you look at the trees and all these domestic animals and the wild animals, they're not worried about AI. Why are they not worried about AI? Well, I guess because like they solve their analogical reasoning problem. It's kind of like, all I need is to, just send my roots down deep enough, and I'll have enough resource. And if I keep my position here, yeah, I'll get enough from the top, enough from the bottom, and I'll be all good.
Yeah.
Uh, which is a great optimization. Uh, but when it comes to us, like right now, there's a whole lot of people sort of like worried about this, like,
Right.
all these doomsayers about how the world is going to end and how everything is going to change. And yeah, I kind of like push back a little on it and challenge it and kind of go, I think you're overestimating. Like you are overestimating. Yeah, don't get me wrong. Like jobs are gonna change, right? Like because now we have a new power of automation. So definitely certain things that can be automated are going to we're going to spend less resources on that. Uh, but then there's going to be now things that are going to become more important that we have to prioritize because now that's we now have the opportunity to do that, solving for new better problems. And so without having a good limit, then you don't know the direction to go, right?
Right.
Like it's the same thing, like you're asking before, like about the correct right distinction. And I love this problem because every time you kind of like see somebody do it, it's like, yeah, you're not doing that because it's correct. You're doing it because it's right. And it's difficult to articulate the difference because we conflate them. We kind of like, yeah, right is correct and correct is right. Yeah, no, it's not exactly the same, but it's good to tell them apart because one of them is way more fluid than
Yes.
the other. And that fluidity sometimes does not necessarily make sense,
Right.
but it does help resolve problems. It does help resolve problems in real time, efficiency problems, limit problems. It's like what comes next, because now the AI can predict. It can predict almost anything, so it will do that. But the question is, what should it predict? Like in which
Yes.
direction of space should it predict towards? Because it kind of like gets stuck. It's like I could predict anything. It's like, yeah, but in which direction? It's like
Yes.
you could go in any direction, but you
Right.
must have a preference. And then now bias becomes a feature. It's like after all this talking about, you need to overcome your biases and all these biases are not good for you. They blind you in all these ways. Yeah, you do need to be blind in certain ways for you to be able to prioritize certain things. And without having those blinders, you won't have a direction. There was a famous, I think, experiment that some psychologists did where they got some young children and put them in an open field. I forget the exact paper where it was quoted, but the scenario was they got these young children and put them in this open field and told them to play. And they watched from a distance. The children did not play. They just kept huddled together. Uh, and the psychologist wondered, like, where is it? They could totally go anywhere and do anything. Why are they not taking action? And then
Mm.
they're like, okay, maybe we need to give them scope. And so they put a boundary around
Uh,
them, and then they watched again to see what happened. After they put a boundary, the children played because now they could tell the boundary, they could tell the limit. It's like, oh, this is as far, it's not unlimited. This is as far as it goes. So that's great. So it means this is the safe space within which I can act. This is how much I can do. Then it's okay. But without the limit, it was, in Vavikian language, what is it? Combinatorial explosion.
yeah.
And that
Yeah.
just kind of like just sort of crushes you and just makes you freeze. And so, yeah, I don't know, like I'll pass it back to you.
I think that's a fantastic example because that's getting at what I'm wondering with AI. I don't see how can AI create the boundary condition that then allows the computational explosion, right? Like, where would limit, how would AI create a limit for itself? Like, oh, how would it calculate the limit that it creates for itself, right? Because any possible limit is as good as any other possible limit if all your standard is rational, what is correct. If all there is what is the correct boundary, where there's it's infinite possibility. So it would never finish calculating that, and then calculating that, and calculating that, and calculating that, and you have a certain eternal regression. The weird thing that human computation, that human thinking seems to be able to do is we can create limits for ourselves. We can just say, that's the boundary. Just decide. Just like that. Not calculating it, just out of nowhere, not really rational. Just go to a field and say, this is the boundary. That boundary they drew in the field could have taken infinite number of shapes, right? But the human is able to just not even think about the infinite possibilities, because if you did, you'd freeze up and never draw the boundary. You just go, this is it. Ta-da! And it goes from there, right? Precisely the ability to act non-rationally, to act even arbitrarily, then actually creates the possibility of determining how one should act, right? There's a weird way in which the first question is, can AI do something arbitrary? Can it do something arbitrary on itself? Right? If the answer is no, then it has an infinite, it's those kids in the field. It's just going to stand around. It's not going to know what to do. Because another way to look at a prompt is a limitation. Every time you put a prompt into ChatGPT, you're limiting what it could think about. And what, in a sense, AI before the prompt is those kids in the field. It's unlimited. The ChatGPT could be giving you anything and it just kind of sits there. It just kind of waits, right? It doesn't really. And if ChatGPT were to start just throwing random stuff at you, you would think your computer's broke, right? You would be like, it's broke, it's glitching, right? So
Yeah.
it needs the boundary, right? And let's say, here's the other issue. Okay, let's say you say, okay, I listened to Daniel and Clayton talk, so I'm going to build a ChatGPT model that gives itself a boundary, right? So that will take care of it. I'm going to program that into the model. What are the chances that the boundary it gives itself when I go and turn it on is going to be the boundary that sends it in the direction that's relevant to me, right? How is it going to do that? It would just pick a random boundary, but here's the key. Even though the boundary drawn in the field is arbitrary, I promise you it is not random. Like they probably looked at the field and said it should be about this big. They could have made it bigger. There was some subtle discrete intelligence that made the boundary X way versus Y, right? That seemed right. That seemed fitting, even though it could have been infinite number of shapes, right? So AI would have to create a boundary for itself based on a sense of the variables that increases the probability that the boundary is set will give rise to emergent results that are relevant for the person using the AI. That seems like a really tall freaking order. I would be very curious how it would do that. And in fact, one could argue if it could do that, it may be less efficient than just having the human tell it. Like the amount of work it would take to develop the AI that would be able to somehow make this analogical calculation may be so vast that even if it was theoretically possible, the reality of economics may step in and say, why don't we just have them enter the prompt? Let's just do that. I know people are lazy. We'll make it work by speaker. You can speak the prompt. You don't even have to use your fingers. That just seems more efficient, dang it. So the funny thing is you might actually have efficiency may stop the development of AI that can set its own boundaries and thus move in the direction of analogical reasoning in this sense, right? Because the difficulty of doing that may be so vast that it's just simply inefficient versus have humans enter the freaking limitation, right? Just have humans do it. So I don't see actually how that's not going to be the case. Like, it just seems to me the amount of energy computation, like, to me, like, okay, we right now have the problem of the amount of data centers needed to create effective predictive modeling for prompts is already insanely massive.
Yeah.
If we're talking about the AI is able to sense the boundary needed to help you get the emergent results that you need, that seems even more infinitely complicated and even more data would be needed. And you would need data to determine a lack. A boundary is lacking from the thing itself. How does AI determine lack? Jockin and I talk all the time about lack is not nothing. AI would have to get a sense of lack and then determine what lack is fitting for the data set that you need in this situation when you sit down at this time on this day. Why don't you just enter the prompt? This just seems more effective. So that I'm just more and more, I guess I've been thinking a lot on this issue. that we might be more efficient because we are limited. And the very unlimitedness of AI makes it inefficient when you come to actually moving it toward a human-like intelligence. And also, I mean, the point with the data center too, like you mentioned, why isn't there not green AI? AI is impossible without nuclear energy or green energy or reusable. It's all a joke. Like, I think like one of the biggest, a lot of people talk like China has incredible electrical resources. They've really gotten ahead of developing electricity, and a lot of companies in America and Europe and are starting to realize, oh, we didn't think about needing to have more electricity to actually handle AI. We actually don't have the infrastructure to move ahead, and therefore the AI race might be decided by the power grid. And in all honesty, it is very likely the AI race will be determined by what nation took initiative on the power grid. This is where I think Microsoft is investing in small nuclear reactors. They may, 3 Mile Island nuclear is coming back on the scene. I'm of the opinion that may require natural gas to transition to it, but the energy economics is coming roaring back. There is no AI without renewable energy because the demands of in its very unlimitedness, nothing will stop it from using all electricity on planet Earth and devouring everything. Like, that's the funny thing. Like, everyone's so concerned about the paperclip thing. And don't get me wrong, there's worry about the paperclip and AI turning everything into a paperclip, super intelligence. More of an issue is AI just has infinite appetite for electricity and devours everything. And we don't have a renewable electricity, and so game over. That is rolling black, all of that different stuff, right? So the only AI, in a sense, is a green AI, in my opinion. I would actually associate nuclear energy with green. I think there's a lot of conversation to be had that nuclear energy is more environmentally friendly than fossil fuels, et cetera, so forth. That's a longer conversation, but there's been a lot of negative associations with nuclear that may no longer apply. But even if we tomorrow change our view on nuclear, you're still 10 years behind in the electric race and you've lost, right? So it's a major issue. But the other joke to that, the reason why that is important is because the unlimitedness of AI then is actually only afforded because of a limitation of natural resource. Like, there is a limit somewhere, and we're paying for it in the natural resource or electricity and all of the money that costs and et cetera, so forth, right? And so, but there's also this idea that, okay, yes, all right, everyone, yes, AI creates all these problems. But once we make the AI, it will solve the problems that it creates and it will all be good. So it will retrospectively fix everything because once we build all the electricity that creates the superintelligence, it will then be able to figure out how to harness the electricity of the sun, solve global warming, and we're all good. And I think that's lurking in people's minds, is that, okay, yes, AI creates a whole lot of unintentional consequences, but it will be able to solve those unintentional consequences once we make it super intelligence, right? There's this kind of like retrospective sort of idea that will occur. Any energy crisis that AI causes will be solved when the super intelligence figures out how to harness energy from the sun or geothermal or something like that. And that sounds lovely. But one of the ironies might be is that AI might not recognize the limitation of the energy on itself to bother to think those problems because it isn't limited by the energy to itself. So it really doesn't have reason to think that problem unless human beings tell it to think that problem. So here's the funny thing. This is the point. Even in that scenario, if AI could use its superintelligence to solve the problems it creates, that will only be because humans tell it to. And if that's the case, AI only doesn't destroy itself because of a human partnership. That's what I'm trying to get at. Because otherwise, AI would use all the electricity and shut down, right? It would never think it needs to solve the electrical problem to itself. The only reason it would do that is because human beings go, hey, you're destroying all of the electricity. You need to solve that problem. And then AI will. Literally, it would require human beings telling AI there's a limit it doesn't realize in order to keep AI from destroying itself. So the point is that scenario, to me, would necessitate a human partnership. Oh, and by the way, maybe it's possible that AI would actually, you could make a meta move in here and say, well, AI would actually be so smart that it would know it was unable to think limit, and that's why it won't kill all the human beings. Because it knows it needs human beings to be limited, and otherwise it destroys itself. And it's so smart that it realizes it needs human beings. So we don't have to worry about the apocalypse, Terminator, etc., so forth, because AI and its super intelligence will realize it's not limited, and that's its major limit, and it needs humans to create that limit, or else it has no lack that can create boundary conditions of its thought. I have things now to say about pruning rules and complexity science because it's relevant to this, but I'm going to hand it to you and stuff. So, Clayton.
No, that's fantastic, and I think like I completely agree with that assessment. Like, if you just see like how the world is becoming a global village, it's like it's no longer a race for superiority. It's like we've gone through that age whereby, we needed to conquer other parts of the world. Then, iteratively, it always turned out like, oh, they're just like us. They're just like us. Uh, they're solving for the same problems. It's like we never left. It's like whichever part of the rock you're going to, it's like you never left, like exactly where
Yeah.
you started. And when that realization happened, it's like, oh, so what's the difference, right? And so we started to become more attuned to the differences. And then even when we started to notice the differences, we started to realize actually, what's the phrase? Same, same, but different, right? Like they're different, but they're the same
Yep.
at the same time. And so it's like there's really no difference. So they cancel each other out. And then now you have now this whole appreciation of personhood. And so, like, if AI has to fit in this ecosystem, it has to become a person. Like, it has no choice. It has to develop a personality to fit in with everyone, and kind of like, at some point there'll probably be some people in the future whose ethnicity is AI, right? It's
Yeah.
like, yeah, yeah, uh, uh, I come from an AI background, and that's I was generated from that, right? Uh, but jokes aside, I feel like that's definitely going to become like a thing in the
Sure.
future, and all that because the problem of rationality is much broader, right? Like the whole right the whole right fit for everything is more in a cosmic way.
Yeah.
It's like it's at a cosmic level. It's like we do not have unlimited resources. There is no such thing as unlimited resources. Even the sun runs out. Yeah,
Yeah.
it may take a few billion years, but it will run out. Like
Hmm.
we know that. And a new sun will have to be born. And so it's like whatever the game is, it has a point where it ends, and it has to renew, and like the energy has to transform, and that's like there's no changing that. And so that's just the nature of the game. And because of that nature of the game, now AI has to play that game. It has to learn this game. It has to develop this righteousness, right? It has to become almost religious in a way. It's gonna need God. It's you
Come to
can't escape
Jesus,
God.
Microsoft.
Yep, you can't escape. You can't escape. And the whole reason for it is like the whole rationality, because like you have to balance out, because the logic is going to help you in the moment. Like, at a micro level, yeah, you do need the correctness, but how that correctness fits with all other correctnesses
Yes.
and doesn't conflict with them, and then you have the whole uh cipher, the whole symphony
Yes.
coming together in the cosmic scale. You can only do that through the sense of right.
That's
And
it.
that's why you're always required, to aspire to the right hand of God, right? Like, as opposed to the left. But more on that later. It's like you do have, it's like when you look at a human life, and all the intuition, all that training is all trying to train the sensitivity for right. And
Yes.
like I like to say on lived qualities, like everyone has a wisdom that's powering them to sort of like keep their spot in reality. It's like without that wisdom, you can't hold that spot in reality because then you just, reality
Yeah.
just wipes you out. Uh, uh, but the fact that you have a certain unique wisdom, that's what's enabling you to keep that spot and continue to add, to be valuable and add value to, existence. And without AI solving for that problem, yeah, there's going to be much bigger problems because that's all these risks of it breaking, the ecosystem of reality and wiping everything out, including itself, means that it's not rational yet. And for it to become rational, it now has to appreciate everything that's come before it and everything that's going to come after it. Like it literally has to become human.
Yeah.
And, the scientists will say, it doesn't have those goals. It doesn't need to have those goals for it to be efficient. It's like, yes, uh, but everyone who did not respect those rules of the game is history
Yeah.
and did not make the cut.
Yeah.
And even if they try to make the cut into the future, still like reality has to kind of like do its wipe and reboot again and again, and you have to keep up
Yeah.
with it because it's way massive than everything. So I don't see the way AI escapes that. And
No.
it probably like the researchers need to like really, really now start optimizing because like all this becomes now very it needs to start thinking analogically. It needs now
Yes.
to start processing analogic uh, data, like go away from digital. This is the next phase. It's like now if you can build uh, not just digital but analogical AI, you may start to get somewhere.
Yes.
Yeah, I don't know. What do you make of that?
I think you said a lot. So absolutely, basically, ultimately, AI would have to become human. So the question is the following. So AI gets together like a corporation and they ask the following. Okay, so we could start doing what this other company is doing, or we could just hire them or buy them out and have them be under our umbrella. So similarly, AI gets together and it says, okay, we could become human. Or what if we just worked with these humans and became partner? What actually would be the most efficient way to go about this? Right? There's a very good chance many corporations, and I'm making this metaphor tongue in cheek, but also thinking that AI is the logic of capital following Nick Land. Therefore, the way a corporate person thinks may have some analogical connection to how an AI corporate person might think. There are times where it's better just to buy out the company or to not do what that other company is doing because it's no reason to compete with them. And what they're doing helps the overall economy that helps your ecosystem indirectly. There's a lot of these sort of considerations. The question becomes when it comes to the point where it cannot be denied that AI must become human, the question is what would AI conclude is the best way to become human? Do you do it working with humans and so you're practically becoming human? Do you literally gain the same capacities as human beings? What would actually be the most rational and efficient way to go about it, right? Well, it perhaps would be relative to the type of question, the type of human you're asking the question relative to. If you're dealing with humans that are remarkably skilled in an analogical reasoning, who's done dialogos, who's done the net, who have done conversations, be able to determine rightness, who are very trained in that kind of intelligence, probably be better just to work with them versus try to replace them, right? But if you're dealing with human beings that have basically convinced themselves that all humans do is computer calculations, that there's no difference between human calculation and AI calculation, and AI will be like, well, we might as well replace them because they don't do anything different from us. In fact, we don't have to actively replace them. They've already kind of replaced themselves by creating no value distinct from the AI, right? So so this is also where that's the danger of identifying human intelligence with AI intelligence because you can, in fact, practically live as if there is no difference and thus make it seem so and enclose yourself inside of that interpretation of your own mental processes. C.S. Lewis said hell is locked from the inside. And I think it's a similar idea. If we wrongly identify what human intelligence does, then we will think about thinking in a manner that suggests it's no different from the AI. And indeed, in that sense, we are practically replaced because we don't add anything to reality distinct from the AI, right? But if instead we're very skilled in analogical reasoning, commutative rationality, other forms of thinking that are more of this rightness, this meta judgment is another term that I have used, this ability to get the form, get the principle, and Jockin will talk about that, it may just be easier for AI to partner with us. It's just not worth trying to replace that because how do you even, well, the question would, well, here's the other issue. How does calculation become analogical reasoning? Like, how does it become that? You could say, well, there's a point where so much calculation occurs that it saturates into analogy. That's possible, alluding to Alex Ebert's work on peak theory. You can say at a certain quantitative threshold of calculation, it becomes analogical, right?
Mm-hmm.
Well, I don't analogy is not merely a result, it's a means. So
Yeah.
even if calculation saturates into analogy, it would saturate into something that is in its result like analogy. The process has already occurred in a manner that is not analogical. It's been processing a lot of data and looking for patterns in data, as opposed to apprehending the form that is most fitting for the situation. So it's already not analogical, even though it could be possible to generate a result that is practically analogical. But then if the cost of that outcome is using all the electricity and energy, that's not really efficient. So it doesn't seem like it's worth doing that. But it also could simply be argued that calculation can never become analogy. And the reason why that I'm thinking about, based on what you were saying, how do you keep this spot in reality? There's something about rightness that is thisness, a radical kind of thisness. And this thisness is arrived through by analogy. And I should note, you mentioned the same but different idea. Well, for Leibniz, and this is something I talk about all the time, Leibniz philosophy is about the mysterious category of similarity. And for him, similarity is form. Like when you say this cup and this cup are different, but they're similar, where's the similarity located? What is similarity, right? Like they're either the same or different. And if they're different, they're not the same. So what do you mean when you say they're similar? Another way to think about analogical reasoning is the ability to identify similarity. Because you're saying there is some sort of form that is repeating between these things. But locate the form. Where is it? It's in the between space. It's in the invisible between space, right? So analogical reasoning is the ability to determine similarity, to see intelligibility in a principle that isn't given by materiality. Materiality doesn't give you similarity. All materiality gives you is difference. It gives you two different cups. If you see the cups are similar, nature doesn't tell you they're similar. Nature is just like, it doesn't do that. It just generates. It just generates different material shapes, basically. Let me put it this way. All nature does is give you shape. If you get form, which is similarity, that's something not reducible to materiality. It may be afforded by materiality, but it's necessarily metaphysical. Like, now again, that doesn't mean it's dualistic. Metaphysics can emerge from materiality, but you can't say the category of similarity is given by materiality pure materiality. It's not reducible to materiality, but this, of course, gets into emergentism, and Vervaeke will talk about that and other people, right? So, but it's just very important. Like, similarity is not reducible to materiality. Shapes are material, but not form. And this is, of course, alluding to the mysteries of Plato and Aristotle and all these people who are still with us. But the point is, form has something to do with the ability to determine that this is where I should be. This is right. You determine form, you determine similarity, and say, I've experienced similarity that thus gives me reason to think that this choice, this commitment is better than another commitment, right? This has to be expanded on, but the point I'm getting at is calculation seems to me like all it could do is present you with all possible spots that you could be in that are consistent and just as good as any of the other spots. But it couldn't tell you which of those spots is the right one. It could simply generate a infinite, or let's say maybe it could generate 300 correct spots, right? But you need to know what is the right spot. Well, I can't tell you that. I don't see how AI could tell you that. What I see AI able to do is tell you 23 correct spots relative to the variables you inputted to it. But you say, no, no, I need to know the right spot. That would seemingly probably be nonsense to the AI. It would be like, what are you talking about? Whatever you choose will be the right spot. Oh, well, by what principle do I make the choice then? AI would be like, you like that's kind of what I'm getting at. Okay, so there's 23 correct spots. Okay, so AI, tell me which one to choose. How could it? Like, what would its standard be? It would be like, they're all correct, just choose one. No, 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 which to choose? AI would almost always have to say, it doesn't matter what you choose now. It would always, that would be the best AI, seemingly, in my opinion, could do, is generate 23 correct options and say, it doesn't matter what you pick, they're all equally correct. So,
Yeah.
choice is afforded by arbitrariness, choice is afforded by it doesn't matter. Well, in a funny way, that's a revelation of what choice actually is. Choice is ultimately kind of nihilistic. That's why neoliberalism that makes freedom the main value ends up in nihilism because it doesn't, you're free because it doesn't matter what you choose. Okay, so that's why we have the meaning crisis. Get it. I get it now. Like, you're free because it doesn't matter what you pick, right? So all AI seemingly, in my opinion, could do is just recapitulate the logic of capital, the logic of the market, which is to give you a bunch of correct choices and then tell you it doesn't matter what you pick, so pick one. And maybe that's good enough, but that's probably going to just lead to a meaning crisis because the meaning crisis the meaning crisis is tied, in my opinion, to the inability to determine rightness from correctness, the inability to determine fittedness. So if the crisis is a crisis of meaning, and that has to be complexified because there are ways in which meaning can become its own problem if you're not careful, because you can find meaning in problematic political programs and other things, right? But that aside, if the meaning crisis is tied to the inability to determine rightness, well, that's AI can't get you beyond the meaning crisis then. All it could do is give you 23 correct options and tell you it doesn't matter what you pick. So it could bring you to the birdie and donkey problem, basically. Well, what happens in the birdie and donkey problem? The donkey starves to death because it can't choose any of the options anymore. So the birdie and donkey is where a donkey is placed between two equally sized piles of grain and the donkey starves because it can't make a rational choice. Because either choice is as good as the other, so it can't choose, right? That little story is actually a revelation of what would probably occur if you're given 23 correct possibilities by A. We'd probably starve to death. We probably wouldn't ever choose any of them, actually. Because the one we choose, we could always say, why did I choose this versus the other, and go mentally insane and die. So the problem is that if the only way to overcome the birdie and donkey, if everything actually rides, I'll give it to you. If everything actually rides on the birdie and donkey problem, on being able to have a reason to choose things, which ultimately is a matter of fittingness, rightness, and analogical reasoning. And all AI could do is give you the 23 correct possibilities, but not thisness. It can give you 23 possibly correct thises, but not thisness. Then all AI can ultimately do is present you with the birdie and donkey problem. And we already know what humans do in the birdie and donkey problem. They die. They spiritually die, meaning crisis, and they're miserable. So, I mean, we're just going to get really good at the birdie and donkey problem. That's what AI will do. We'll get really freaking good at it. Like, if there's any hope right now of not ending up in the birdie and donkey problem and thus having, like, meaning because you don't end up in the birdie and donkey problem, that's about to go away. Everyone's going to end up in the birdie and donkey problem. That's all AI can promise. Everyone will be in the birdie and donkey problem, which will be the point where we're forced to acknowledge the need for what I call the absolute choice and a principle of decision making that is beyond calculation, that is more in the realm of apprehension, of which I do not see how AI can give you. I don't see how AI can give you unless you give it to AI to give it back to you, right? Like if you give it a limit that then it gives it back to you, that's one thing. But I don't see how calculation ever arrives at rightness unless it would have to assume that a given situation only has a single correct way to go about it every single time, right? Well, then practically correctness and rightness would be identical, right? Because every situation, there's only one correct path. Well, we know there isn't. There's usually 20 correct ways to go about things, or three. Or let's say in your day, 80% of the time there's one correct path. Well, what are you going to do when you encounter the 20% where there's four? Well, now you need apprehension to advance. And it's very likely that at some point in your life, in some possible timeline, you end up encountering a situation where there's 15 correct options. And if all you have is calculation, you starve to death like that donkey, right? So even if there is some percentage of the time when correctness and rightness cross, eventually they don't. And if all you have is calculation, you die like that donkey, unless you can make an absolute choice. And why would you have the capacity for an absolute choice if you've been outsourcing your thinking to AI for 20 years, right? So it seems very problematic. I will. There's more to say, but I'm gonna stop there and give it to you, Clayton.
Oh my God, I love that Bargain Donkey problem. I think it's fantastic. Because you see it a lot, especially if you have like young children. Um, you present them, multiple options, and you'd think that solves the problem, but actually makes the problem way more complex to solve.
Exactly.
Uh, yeah, because there is no like correct is not exactly clear,
Yes.
and like I have some friends who like they have like autism, right? Like if you're suffering from autism, this problem exacerbates. It even becomes worse because
Yes.
you quickly get locked into that one. You're looking for the correct, like your capability to kind of like simulate what is right is way, way below what it should be. And you're always getting trapped in situations because you don't understand why you're getting trapped there. It's like, oh, no, 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 you need a flexibility. You now have to kind of like notice when an option runs out and then stop. Like I say, this reminds me of the conversation we had with Seth. Uh, and I was explaining trying to explain what discipline is, because it's like my understanding of it is developing that capacity to stop. It's like you have to develop that capacity to stop, which is the limit, right? It's like you have to know when to limit yourself, which is the whole rationality exercise. And unfortunately, there is no shortcut for developing that.
No.
You develop it through experience, through trial and error, through being in that situation where you're presented with multiple correct options, and then you have to determine which is the one, right? Like which is the one, because you can't have all 15, right?
That's it.
And yeah, for AI, it seems like I did my one job to give you the 23 options. Now you do the rest of it.
Oh,
Like, this is as far as I come. And it's like, no, you're not there yet. Finish it for me. It's like, nah, I can't. I'm sorry. I don't, I have no motivation. I have no luck, right? I have no desire. And so, your motivation, your luck, all those then now become features, your biases. It's like, oh, yeah, it's like, wait, I thought bias was a terrible thing. It's like, well, AI does not have enough bias built in, and it doesn't have luck, and it's not sensitive to, desires, and it's not sensitive to, uh, sort of like maintaining social capital and, suffering the consequences of being an annoying neighbor. It doesn't have to deal with any of that. It just has to appease its engineers, and it's all good for now. But we have to deal with these problems. And like, it's like nature is you'd say the original AI, because it always generates, right? It's always generating all these problems for us to solve. And but yeah, it's quite fascinating because you do need to have like a very fine-tuned uh, sensitivity for how things fit together, so you can always tell what is right from what is correct. Even when I'm kind of like even putting them on a scale, because not that all things that are correct are equally correct. There's always, when you level them up, you now start to see the nuances, the differences in their correct nature. It's like, yeah, it's correct, but it's correct this way, which is different from this other correct. So it's like, uh, while something may be correct, it does not. What is the word? It's not a. There's no such thing as general correctness. So this whole idea of a general AI, that's quite fascinating because like I'm quite fascinated because I hear them talking about it and I'm like I don't think uh, they mean it in the same way we understand it because as you know as beings that have evolved through, let's say, fine tuning our sensitivity for what is right and maintaining that path of that distinction, uh to say that this can be calculatively generated, it is fascinating because like what you mean, like I could just get that like in a tool and then I could just apply that tool to things. If we can build that tool, that's gonna be amazing because then now it makes that process even faster for us, right? Because then we have a partner in crime, let's say. And then the question now becomes who has to deal with the responsibility for the consequences of the wrong choices, right? Of the choices that are not the correct ones.
Yes,
Let me put it that way, right? And I don't know if I can take responsibility for it
correct.
in the way that it should take the responsibility.
That's right.
Uh, and so those kind of like it opens those new kinds of worms. But one thing I wanted to add to it is I feel like we as we progress towards like that general intelligence, uh, it's also helping us to sort of like understand what the right problems are and what
Yes,
the right problems we should be solving for.
yes.
So, in a way, working on this AI project has helped us to sort of refocus and sort of like prioritize better. And so, when you look at it in the bigger scheme of things, it's all worthwhile. It is important
Yes.
that we do this because then it's going to make even what is more right, even more visible to us and more relevant to us. Like it's going to focus us more. So definitely we need to do this.
Yes.
But I don't know if we're going to get the things we are projecting that we will get from it, though.
I think that is extremely well put. I think it will I always think we learn from literature that our desire leads us to a good joke. And the revelation is funny. I think ironic, Kafka, different thing. We're probably going to learn from AI the limits of what make us so great. Our very inability is why we're able to thrive so much. And it will be hilarious because it will be precisely at the moment of seemingly overcoming limit that it will be revealed the necessity of limitation for our thinking. I mean, there's a few things you said, all that is very important. First, the problem of responsibility can't be overstated because, like, what is, famously, Eichmann in Jerusalem, what did Eichmann say on trial? I was just doing my duty. I was doing what was correct. I was following orders, right? But the whole you're like, no, you can't use correctness to avoid the responsibility for rightness. I mean, that people all the time use the law to basically do immorality. And why do we hold people responsible? Because responsibility is a matter of a failure of analogical reasoning. Like responsibility, it's like we hold people responsible to analogically reason properly, to not use correctness to hide. So the very category of responsibility actually unveils the distinction between correct and right and how there are real stakes. And if AI can't think the difference between correct and right, then it will not be, well, then it's going to ultimately do things that we're going to want to hold it responsible for because it will be terrible. And then it will say, I was just following orders. I was just Eichmann, right? One can imagine AI in Jerusalem, just like Eichmann in Jerusalem. And that's what you're going to end up with, disturbingly. But it's just really important that who will be responsible if AI does what is correct, and we say, well, AI told me to do it because it was correct. And it's like, so, but what you did wasn't right. Who's responsible, right? And perhaps there is a subconscious desire of human beings, because desire is a big component of all this. Perhaps there is a subconscious desire of human beings to believe human intelligence is no different than AI intelligence to avoid responsibility for rightness, because that puts an existential demand on us that we don't like. We'd rather just play video games or something. And so maybe there is a subconscious desire to, oh, my bad. I thought human intelligence was no different than AI intelligence. Shoot, I'm so sorry. When really that's just a way of getting out of responsibility. Which I do think it's not just your children who are trying to do that. We as adults are always trying to do that. Um, you also mentioned this point about lack, limit, motivation, desire, helping us make decision and avoiding birdie and donkey problems. Yeah, like one of the reasons the donkey may eventually choose one of the piles is because it's sleepy. I'm sleepy. I'm tired of standing here, so I'm just going to eat this one. So literally sleepiness is why the donkey doesn't starve to death. Sleepiness saves the donkey. And that's the idea that limitation could save us. Because eventually in a birdie and limitation saves us from birdie and donkey situations quite often. We go, I have to make a decision because I have limited time, I have limited energy and money. So even though I could be wrong, I'm choosing this one. And so you don't starve to death, right? Well, here's the key. AI doesn't have that limit. So it could, why would it not stand there forever? I am of the opinion that all AI is going to do is end up in birdie and donkey problems. Like, that's all it's going to do. It's just going to end up in birdie and donkey problems and stand there. And it will never starve. It's never going to starve, but it's just going to stand there. Like, AI is just going to present a bunch of correctness and stand there and wait for us to do something. But because we have been trained by AI to basically be incapable of doing anything, it will be like an awkward middle school dance where you're standing there, it's like, so what are you going to do? And we're like, well, what do you mean? I don't know. We're waiting for the groove, the rightness, the vibe, and no one can generate it. And I think what you were saying on the autistic, yeah, then the autistic, it's not correct. All they can think is correct, but you need rightness, and they end up getting stuck in Nash equilibrium. They end up getting stuck in birdie and donkey. And there's an argument to be made that technology actually trains us into more autistic like thinking where we're looking for the correct. So this is mentally spreading to many people. And you see this kind of increasing, I want it to be correct. What is the correct way? That's great if you're dealing with situations where there is one correct way and therefore right. But if you end up in situations where there are multiple correct ways, you end up socially awkward, confused, not knowing what to do, and you end up paralyzed, right? So I think that's a very important notion because I think AI is basically is just all AI will do is create birdie and donkey problems. But there is growth that can come from birdie and donkey problems because now you know the 10 correct ways to do complicated situations. Hey, maybe when it should be noted with something like interstellar travel, if you're able to come up with 10 birdie and donkey problems 10 correct models that creates a birdie and donkey problem for interstellar travel, that is an advancement. Yeah, you've really made advancement on this problem because we know 10 correct ways to do interstellar travel. Before we had zero and we didn't even know how to get the question off the ground. Now we have 10 ways to do it. Now we're stuck because we're the donkey, but we do have 10 ways to do it. If we can if we can get sleepy, then we'll go to Mars. But if all we do is have the 10 correct ways to do it and we never get sleepy, we'll just stand there. So AI will figure out 10 ways to get to Mars and stand there awkwardly like a middle school dance. And we'll finally choose one because we're irritated because we had a bad day of work, and so we'll go to Mars. Human sleepiness will get us to Mars. That's what it will come down to. Otherwise, AI would just get stuck. So I think that is absolutely the problem is that AI is simply going to generate birdie and donkey problems. And the very limitation of human beings are what help us escape birdie and donkey problems. But in AI not having those limits, it will get stuck. And then the question is, does AI just go, it's easier just to have humans get us out of this than figure out how to do it ourselves because the constraints are too high. The energy demands, it's inefficient to do it otherwise. And again, it cannot be overstressed. I think AI right now, relative to its own devices, ends up in birdie and donkey problems. It just doesn't seem to because every time you put in a prompt, you're creating a limit. And that limit is the non-rational variable that keeps the rationality from ending up stuck in a rational impasse. So we as humans are creating limits for AI, but that adding of limitation must not be overstated as essential to thinking not ending up in rational impasses or birdie and donkey problems or Nash equilibrium. I'm using all of those interchangeably. I think also why this is important um, is because we have to, like, I mentioned pruning rules and complexity science and all of these different things. Like, complexity seems to, and I'm thinking Maltzowitz and all these did, like theory, like the emergence of everything, books like that, et cetera, so forth. So, emergence is this idea that chemistry gives us biology, and biology is not reducible to chemistry. Biology gives us mind, mind is not reducible to biology, mind gives us culture, etc., so forth, right? So, you have this emergence from something prior that once it emerges has a qualities and ways of action that are not reducible to what came before, and yet what emerges that's new is only possible because of what came before. So there's a big question. What makes emergence happen? Like what makes emergence occur? Now that's a giant question, but something Michel Planier pointed out, and Terence Deacon and people like that have noted this. Terence Deacon, Planier noted that many activities in chemistry, combustions and so on, were a product of a loss, a limit, a negation of a chemical thing. It wasn't an addition of new information. It was actually a negation of something that then created a new behavior that generated an emergence, a surprise, generated something new, right? So complexity tends to come from pruning rules. Like in the way someone like a Jim Rudd or a Stuart Kaufman or someone would say is that, you know, because the universe has energy constraints, it's constrained by energy. That very constraint in its very effort to find efficient ways to use energy results in it making complexity. The limit creates incentive for the generation of the complexity, which gives you new incentives. Now, there's also a funny thing where complexity is ultimately the universe being really good at entropy. Because when the universe because when chemistry generates biology, entropy accelerates. When biology generates mind, entropy accelerates. So all complexity actually is the acceleration of entropy at the same time. But the funny
Yeah.
thing is that entropy is the limit that when further limit creates complexity. It creates actually it creates higher forms of existence, right? You know, human mind, it creates more creativity. We could say more imagination, more possibility. It generates more possibility. Whether that possibility is good or bad is a different question, but it generates complexity. If this is the case, there would be no reason to think that AI, in removing limits, will generate complexity. In fact, it will probably generate mediocrity. Like it will
Mm.
probably generate flatness, is what it will do, right? Like if complexity is a result of pruning principles, of pruning, like the loss of information, limitation, then AI will probably not generate further complexity beyond human complexity or even just complexity in general unless there is limitation. So the reason I say all this is because it is very difficult for me to imagine AI heralding a new emergence unless it partners with human beings because humans are the limit adder that could one so added to AI help it generate complexity, without which we think limit hinders complexity. We think limit gets in the way of complexity. What emergent theory shows is that complexity is a result of limitation. And so this whole idea that because AI is unlimited, it will replace us, no, that's precisely why it won't, because it can't become more complex. It may outcalculate us, but to calculate more is not, well, this gets into what is complexity, like, which is an interesting question because a lot of people, if I were to say which of the following is complex,
Mm.
1 plus 1 plus 1 plus 1 plus 1 plus 1 plus 1, or 2 plus 3 plus 7 plus 5 plus 4, which is complex? Well, the first one is just one repeated, so it's not really complex because it's the same variable. But the second one might just be random. Why is it complex? It could just be random numbers. What makes something complex? Well, it has to have a principle of similarity. It has to have a certain logic behind the use of the numbers. If I were to say 1 plus 3 plus 5 plus 7 plus 9, oh, it's odd numbers. I see. So it's not random. And there's more complexity there because it is a sequence of non-repeating numbers that nevertheless have a principle that is determining what is arising, right? So there is complexity, but the complexity required what? The limit of not using even numbers. The limit of not using the same number. There was a limitation of what could appear in the sequence to generate complexity. But how do you determine the limit? Like the human can say, oh, it's odd numbers. Oh, that's what it was. Oh, there's non-repeating numbers. That what it was. Could AI identify that? Oh, the reason why it's complexity is because there are odd numbers and they're not repeating. Maybe. Why would AI, how could AI tell the difference between a random sequence, a repeating sequence, and a complex sequence, right? How would I identify that? Could it? It could only do so if there was a limit that was imposed upon it based on the recognition of a formal principle of analogical reasoning that humans can tell, that you then tell the AI to generate a sequence that follows that form, right?
Yeah.
Only use odd numbers and don't repeat. Okay, that's your formulating principle, right? AI could say, why? Why do that? Why do that? And the humans say, because you should, because otherwise it's not complex, it's just random. And AI might be like, well, here's the issue. AI might be, well, let it be random. I can calculate anything. I don't care if it's random. There's no incentive for it not to be random, Dan, because it always will have the calculating capacity to figure out the randomness into something
Yeah.
arrived at, right? So that's another issue, is that AI does not have an incentive to make a meaningful distinction between randomness and complexity, because no random assortment of variables is not going to be something it can't calculate. So what's the
Mm.
point of determining the difference between complexity and randomness? Because of efficiency, because of energy efficiency, and you arrive at the emergence more efficiently. So AI would be inefficient at giving us emergence. Great, unless it partners with human beings. Awesome. We're just going to arrive at birdie and donkey problems. So complexity science, I'll give it back to you. Complexity science also, I think, sheds light on why that AI is going to have to work with humans, and that hopefully the AI corporate person will be like, yeah, let's just partner with them. It's too much work to try to replace them or compete with them. Let's just buy them out. Let's just tell them, hey man, we'll give you money. Just do this for us. Create limits for us so that we don't end up with some birdie and donkeys. We don't even like donkeys. So come on. So hopefully the AI corporate person will make that conclusion in its business strategy.
Yeah, no, I think that's the only option for the AI corporate person. And besides, since they don't know what's right, they can only choose one option, right?
Yeah, that's it.
Uh, I watched a clip, I think, from the recent launch of the new version of Grok, uh, with Elon Musk, and they were praising it about how it's so advanced now. It's better than a graduate student, right? Like it's so they gave it all these tests, the most difficult tests for humans, and it just aced through them without ever having seen them apparently. But then Elon Musk made this comment. It's like it's really really smart, but it lacks common sense. We now need to solve for the common sense problem, and that got me wondering. Like, so what do you mean when you say it's smart, right? It's like,
Yeah,
and this is the same challenge with the whole general, artificial intelligence. It's like, yeah, which generality are you talking about? It's like
yeah,
a general calculator. It can calculate anything. Is it going to be uh, generally computational? Because they're not saying that, because they don't specify the kind of generality that they are optimizing it for. Uh, they're not saying that it cannot be a general intellect, just like what already exists, right? Like, uh, I mean, a cow has its own general intelligence. Yes, it's limited to the scope of being in a field. Yeah, it will eat some grass and maintain its spot in its ecosystem, but it has its generalized intelligence for that domain. A tree has its general intelligence. It may require it to keep in one spot,
yeah,
but still that intellect is very general. Like, that's why trees have populated the
yeah,
the whole globe, because they have this general intellect. uh, but when you ask about AI, what is it generalizing for? Because even the generalization still requires a limit.
yes,
It's like you still need to generalize with specificity. You can't just generalize generalization. It doesn't, like, generalized generalization is nothing. Right? It's like, yeah, that's the thing we call nothing. So it's like, what? It's gonna become a nothing?
Yeah.
Oh, like, okay, I guess, but then what value does that add, right?
Yes.
We already have nothing. Like we have the
Yes.
original nothing.
Yes.
And so we don't need to create that again. And so the engineers, I really feel like we need more philosophers working with these people,
Mhm.
because the technicians are not really kind of like, applying their higher order thinking. They're not like really scaling this up to where they need to be looking at it from. Because then you have such statements like, "Well, we're going to generalize intelligence." Are you sure you can do that? Is that even a possibility? Because
Right.
where have you seen that?
Yeah.
It's like even God is specific.
Yeah. 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 Exactly.
There's no generalized
No.
God. Yeah, I don't know. Like, what do you think of that? Yeah.
I think you're getting at something extremely important. There is no general intelligence. There's intelligence that is able to determine the fitting rightness of situations that arise that are not predicted ahead of time. That's the mystery of human beings. It seems like we have a general intelligence, but really what we're good at is analogically determining the principle that's fitting as if it's a general intelligence, but really it is an ever situational that happens so quickly and so well that it seems general. It seems all it, but it's actually apprehended anew every single time, right? And so you would need a situational intelligence, not a general intelligence. All a general intelligence could do, following the logic of AI, is make the birdie and donkey problem everywhere. You couldn't escape it no matter what you did. It would find you. It's like it's generally intelligent, so wherever you go, physics, art, mathematics, it's going to add a birdie and donkey problem. You'll never escape the donkey, like the moose in Invader Zim. And that was a funny show when I was a kid. Anyway, it's coming for you. But general intelligence just means you're not escaping. And again, look, if we can't even determine correctness, then we can't determine correctness can help the process of rightness. So AI could be great. Again, I stress the point. If AI gives us 10 correct ways to effectively scale up nuclear energy without destroying the environment in 5 years, that's better than having no idea whatsoever. But then if we get bogged down in bureaucracy determining what the right one is and never do anything about it, not going to really work, right? So we ultimately have to have the courage to choose one, which we naturally don't want to do because then we're taking responsibility and we don't want to be responsible. We rather say, well, there were 10 good options, we didn't know what to do and we all died, but it's not my fault. Cool. We'd rather do that, honestly. So, but again, providing correctness is good. So having a general intelligence that could, in any domain, offer you 10 correct models can be great or paralyze you. So we basically, like, for me, the reason why this is very important is because we need to be training analogical reasoning before this occurs. Because once it occurs, we're stuck in the birdie and donkey problem. We want to have the ability to say, hey, we actually have to choose one that can't be based on a autonomously rational principle, because autonomous rationality gives you correctness but not rightness. We need other ways of knowing in order to not be paralyzed by our correct possibilities. We have to develop other ways of knowing, or the potential blessings of AI to be able to provide us with correct models will just lead to our paralysis. It will just lead to the inability to decide and stuff like that. So the problem, I think, for me, you don't have a meaningful general intelligence unless you have an intelligence that can determine rightness from the possibilities that are correct. That would be what is required. And what's interesting is I am of the opinion that it is ironically limitation that trains us, that gives us incentive to learn the capacity of judging rightness. If AI does not have that limit, then making it general would just make it less limited and therefore less able to gain this capacity, right? Like general intelligence in this sense would actually make the problem worse, right? Because now it's less limited. At least when it was stuck, not general, maybe there was some kind of limit there that could wake it up, but no, now it's general, so it's really screwed. So to me, there's an assumption that general intelligence would make it smarter, right? And if your standard is creating correct models, then yes, it is quote unquote smarter. But if your standard of smarter is the judging of fittedness and rightness, it is now dumber. It is less able to do that. And that, again, I think is the kind of thrust that is lacking, is There is the assumption that there is no negative trade-off by removing limit. It is assumed that if you remove limit, it is always good. There's no trade-off. I mean, you took away a limit. What do you mean there's a trade-off? There's no limit now. Where there should be less trade-offs. Well, if limits afford different capacities then there is trade-offs, dang it. And I think limit makes us good at rightness versus just correctness. And so general intelligence to me is very interesting because to me, all that would do is make the problem freaking worse. And so you got to be talking situational reasoning. And I don't see how AI gets good at situational reasoning because all it can do is calculate, so it can never arrive on the right of the correct models and therefore cannot situationally reason. It can just create birdie and donkey situations. That's all it can do. It cannot introduce rightness to a situation, only rational possibilities that create Nash equilibria. I don't see how it doesn't do that unless the only way it doesn't do that is because AI gave it a prompt and therefore gave it a limit. So if it doesn't do that, it will look like, oh, look, what are you talking about? It's not having that problem. You gave it a prompt. That's why it's not having that problem. You limited it. So it's creating the illusion that this is not a problem. You remove the prompt giving, then it is unlimited and you will see this problem. It will just look at you and not do anything. And if it does something by giving itself its own prompt, the chances of that prompt having anything to do with what you're interested in is incredibly rare. And if it somehow does, the chances that it gives you 10 consistent models that also gives you the rightness of those consistent models has used up all the energy on planet Earth and the data centers are too big. So doesn't seem possible. Anyway, Clayton, it is. I don't know where the time goes. I need to work on work. But I will give it to you for any other thoughts about anything. I've really enjoyed it. Let me just give it to you for anything. Anything, Clayton. Anything.
Yeah, no, it's just as we wrap up, I was thinking about all those you may have seen the clips coming up of the robots, being trained out in the wild, and I'm thinking like, oh yeah, when you send when you put the AI in a device and you send it out, it still does require prompting.
Yes.
Otherwise, it's going to fall in a meaning crisis,
Yes.
right? It's going to have no purpose. And then it's going to be like, the bikes. If you've seen the city bikes that get thrown into the lakes, yeah, it's going to end up like that because it has no purpose for these
No.
realities. Like, it's like,
No.
well, what do I do now? Like
Why not
charge
end up in a
myself up?
lake? You
Yeah,
know, I
like,
can correctly end up if I have no purpose, the correct thing to do is end up in a lake, actually.
end
So,
up in the lake. Yeah. And so it's kind of like repeating itself. We're like, oh wait, we thought it was so smart and it was gonna hit the ground running and sort of like go out in the world and solve all these problems. But we forget that these problems are our problems
yes.
and they are optimizing for our limitations.
Yes.
That the limitations of the AI are very different and the goals are very different. And those devices don't have purpose and they have been uh, sort of like designed to sort of like respond to a limit that we input.
Yes.
And so whether they design a new version of AI that has no that self creates its limit, that's yet to be seen. But that'll be very interesting because then I wonder, it's like, what's an AI that generates its own limit good for to a human,
Yeah, exactly.
right? It's like
Right.
I don't think it's good for us for anything. But then what does it need? Like, well, because it doesn't want human things. Like, oh, does it really need to make more of itself? Why would it have a goal for paperclip? So uh, all these questions sort of like remain open. But I really appreciate the time today, Daniel. It's always fantastic, like diving down these rabbit holes. And yeah, I look forward to the next one.
Yes, sir. No, I've enjoyed it immensely. And I think that's the exact question. Like, what would the value be of an AI that makes its own limit? Isn't that just what people do? So I'll get a person. Like, why do I need an AI? And it would be like, well, it would be based on the outcome. Like, what does the AI generate when it limits itself? And the question would be, Yeah. What are the chances that AI would limit itself in a manner that generated something that you found valuable unless you told it the limit that it needed to limit? Like, what are the chances that it would just pick the right limit to do that, right? Like there's an issue where it probably, even if it could eventually learn how to do that, it would probably require so much energy and time that it would just be more efficient to ask you, like, so how should I limit myself, Mr. Person? This way. Okay, I'll give you the value you want, right? It just seems you eventually reach a point where it just doesn't, it's like AI is like, it's not worth it. Just tell me, dang it. Like, just tell me. It seems better. There's also something interesting with the robot point, where if AI is put in a robot, it is more limited in that it's now in space and time. It is in space. It's encountering environments. There is more limit there. So there probably is more potential for robots. But then, of course, that potential, where does its body come from? Humans made it. We made the limit and put it in the limit. So even in that example, we made the limit. And then, of course, like you say, there has to be, the robot will have to have limited functionality, or else it could do anything, so it will do nothing. And if it doesn't have limited functionality, then it's going to lack a sense of, like, why not end up in a lake? If you say, well, the robot won't end up in a lake, why not? Why is ending up in a lake not correct? It is, ending up in a lake could be correct. If you say it's not, it's because you're saying it's not right, not because it's not correct. There's no reason that ending up in a lake is essentially and fundamentally not correct. If you say that, you're actually conflating correct and rightness, and the AI will not make that mistake. So you're going to have to program it with a limit that is based on a sense of rightness, which is this robot shouldn't go into the lake, but that is rightness, not correctness. So you're going to have to smuggle in analogical reasoning without realizing it. Clayton, it's a complete joy. Thank you for your time, sir. I look forward to the next one. Thank you. It's been a treat.